Well, today we're going to start on this Royal Doulton fairy figurine, and we've got some problems here. The wings are broken off, missing. I don't have them, and so I'll have to make those. And I have a tip of the flower is missing, or a tip of the leaf is missing. There are also some tiny chips on some of these flowers, or the edges are chipped. So that's what we need to do. The main thing here, though, is I have to make these wings that go in these little stumps here. And the way to do that, I have a picture of this from the internet. There are several versions of this, and they can vary quite a bit. But I went by the number on the bottom, and I looked it up on the internet, and I found this piece, and from that image I calculated the size of the wings that are going to go on here. So they're this size, and the longer wing sits proud from the smaller one, and it's symmetrical, so they're going to be mirror images of each other. One goes on this side, one goes on the other side. So I need to make two of these, and I'm going to make them out of A+B putty, epoxy putty. It's very hard stuff, and it can be difficult to carve. So what I'm going to do is shape these wings, make copies of these wings in wood. It's because I can carve it easier. And then from that I'll make a mold into which I put the A+B putty. And so I have a piece of wood onto which I traced my wings. I'll cut that out and I'll carve it. Okay, so I've got a piece of wood here with my wings drawn on them. I'm going to cut this in half, and I'll just show cutting out one of them. You don't need to see them both. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to make a mold of my blank for my fairy wings, and I'm using this product. You've seen me use it before. It's called Easy Mold. It's a 2-part silicone putty that mixes up quick and easy and cures quick and easily. This is what's inside the box. It's one side's white, one side's purple. You mix them together till there are no streaks. I've already measured out my pieces. Now I mix it together. Just mix until we don't see any more streaks. And then I mix it for a few seconds longer. And now I'll roll it out. So I was going to make this, my fairy wings, I was going to carve a piece of wood left and right, and and then make a mold of that. And then I thought I might be, since I'd have to make that, form this times two, a left and a right, and then make a mold of that, which I would further have to work. I just thought, well, let's just skip that and make the mold out of, make the casting out of A plus B putty, because it'll be harder and it won't have grain to it like this wood does, and I could get splinters in this when I carve and stuff. So I changed my mind. So what I'm going to do is make a 1/2 mold casting of this. Instead of a 2-part mold, all I have to do is fill this up and level it, and I'll have a good mold here. So I'm going to press my wood into it and push the edges up to it. So I'm going to transfer this to a tile. So I have a nice level bottom on it. And I can also shave this down to a nice flat. Too late, my mold's setting up. It'll still work. So I'm going to let that cure. Alright, so I'm going to put this, I have some leftover A plus B from something else I just worked on, and I'm going to use the leftover. Instead of throwing it away, I'm going to put it into this mold. Okay, so I've used up my excess A plus B, and it's not as full as I want it. I need this to be level with the top of this, but I was just using up some leftover stuff. So I'm going to fill this to the top and let that set overnight, and then tomorrow I'll pop this one out and fill it again for the other blank. But anyway, just pointing out why it's not filled. I just ran out of stuff. So I've got the mold, the casting out of the mold, and I did some fills on it because I wanted it to be nice and smooth and even thickness and all that jazz. So I've got both of them. I've got a left and a right. This is the filled side. And so now I'm going to pencil in the wings. So on one side, they are oriented one in front of the other, that the wings sort of overlap. So one side's going to be on the outside, and on the other side, this one will be proud. So I'm going to pencil it in my guidelines right now. And it just sort of fades out to 0 here. This will be thinner down here. You won't even see the line. This will be about this much thinner on both sides. I've got two different slightly colored epoxies. There's the same epoxy, just different colors. So now I'll do the other side. Proud. And we'll do the same thing here. Right down the middle. And these lines meet right there. Left and right. The next stage is we'll shape these. Alright, so I have my blanks made out of epoxy, A+B epoxy. These are my fairy wings for the Doulton Fairy, and here's my practice one. I did one already. It's the front side, it's the inside, and so they're symmetrical, so we're going to carve this one today. So I'm on the back side and I have to dish these sides of the wings out. You see that depth in it? So we're roughing it out at this point, so we've got to dish out this end of it a little bit more. Okay, so now what I'll do is use a diamond file and shape this a little bit more before I turn it over. And what I like about a diamond file is it works in any direction, whereas normally a normal file only works in one direction. So we'll smooth this out and then we'll flip it over. I do the concave side first because if I did the rounded side first, it would rock as I was trying to work on it. This way it's flat and it sits rather level. When I do this, so I'm going to smooth out all those ridges and bumps in here and that roughing with this diamond file. I'm using the rounded back of this to work that contour. So I've changed the lighting so you can see some contour here. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Luckily there's not a lot of detail in these things. They're just slightly concaved on one side and slightly convex on the other. So now I need to convex this, and I'll round off the inside line and the outside line. We'll curve this out. So that's what I'm going to do now. First I'm going to work this line here. Here's a rough shape of the other side of the wing, and now we'll run a file over it, refine the shape, take the bumps and the grooves and the scratches out of it. Give it a quick sanding, and then I'll come back, and there's a few bumps and pits and scratches that need to be filled with milliput, but we're about 90% done with these. So I'm using micro mesh to sand this. I don't want to get too crazy with it because I'm going to do some fills and have to sand it again, but just to give you an idea what it looks like once we've refined that. Like I say, we got a little bit of tiny filling and leveling to do, but we're 95% there. And here are, this is the one I just did. The reason the color difference is the epoxy, if you can see the edge of that. I ran out of the epoxy when I was filling the mold, and I used a brand new pack which was a slightly different color. It's the same stuff though. So here's the fairy wing and where it's going to go. I still need to do a little bit more work on it, but this is the piece it's for, and this is where it goes. So I still need to do some tweaking on these fairy wings, and so I've got some wobbles in this that's not going to come out by filing, so I'm going to fill the low parts with milliput. So here, there's some low spots here and here, another one here, and then a little bit on the back. So I'm going to fill that. Same here, I have a couple of bubbles that I exposed when I carved it out. Got a ding on the edge of a, and this sort of a little dip right here. I want to fill all this in. I'll overfill it and we'll file it down later. All right, so I'm going to do a pigmented fill on this Doulton ceramic because it's easier and quicker to do than trying to fill it with milliput and then paint it and stuff. I have these tiny chips on here that I've already filled a couple of them with milliput because they were big enough, but I've got several that are really tiny, and it's just too small a spot for the epoxy to the paste. Sorry, the epoxy putty to stick to well. So when I start filing on it, I'm liable to knock it off. So a better option here is to pigment some epoxy with powdered artist pigments, and that's what we have here in this box. I've got a set of these. These are dry powdered. It's the color component of paint. Paint is essentially a very expensive glue. This is the color, and the rest of it makes it stick to whatever you're painting. And so I have some yellow powder. I'll take a little tiny bit, and this stuff is super concentrated, super dense with pigmentation, so we use a very tiny amount, and I mix it into one side of my clear epoxy, and this tiny bit of powder will probably pigment this whole thing bright yellow. I want to move this away from the other half of my epoxy. I don't want it to start setting up. So now this is pure saturated bright yellow. A tiny bit translucent, but that's okay. Now we need to tone that down. As you can see, this doesn't match the color I need. It's a little too intense. We need to add some white to that. Since we add white to just about every color, we've got a larger container of it. I'll get a tiny bit of it on my toothpick. I'll mix that in. And if you do this sort of thing, you want to mix much longer than you think you have to, because these are super tiny, super fine grain pigments, and it will mix fairly quickly, but if you keep stirring it, you keep distributing that tiny bit of powder and breaking those tiny bits of powder into smaller and smaller granules. And I could sit here for 5 minutes doing this, and it'll get lighter and lighter with that tiny bit of white I put into it. As you can see already, we've taken a lot of the saturation out of that. And we can mix this all day, and it's not going to set up because it's only half of our epoxy. Now I'll just take a little bit of this on my toothpick, and I can see that I'm very close to the color I need. So we'll go ahead and mix that. I'll take my other component, bring it over here and mix it in. The other thing to remember is that whatever color I make here, whatever color I mix is going to get diluted by 50% when I put the other half of this clear stuff in it. So as you can see, it got even a little less saturated since I did that. So what I'm working with here is 6-minute epoxy. And I'm going to stir it just until it starts to get a little bit set up, because I don't want it to run when I put it where I put it. I'm reapplying this. It wasn't stiff enough. I didn't wait long enough. So now hopefully it's getting closer to what I need. So these pigmented, this artist pigments, the brand doesn't really matter. As long as you get quality artist pigment level, you'll be good. It's available. Just do a search online, you'll find it. Next, what I'm doing now is just playing with it until this sets up to the consistency I want. When that happens, I will have less than a minute of working time with it. I'm okay if it's a little proud. I can always file it down if I have to. There we go. It's finally getting to the thickness and viscosity I need. I need to put a tip on this leaf here, and I'm going to use A+B putty, epoxy putty, and so I'm going to put a piece of masking tape on here as a backup, just an assistant. See, I only have a tiny bit of the end of this for this stuff to stick to. And I'm going to try not to break the leaf off when I do this. So I'm forcing it up against that edge to get good adhesion. Get some water on my tool. Let that set overnight. It's not sticking well. I'll let that sit overnight. Get hard. So I'm ready to bond this wing on here, and I'm going to be using the same stuff that I made the wing out of. It's this A+B putty. Get a gob of that on here on the stump. Okay. And I'm going to glue them on one at a time because I want this to be good and set up before I try to work around it on the other wing. I got water on my tool to keep it from sticking. Okay, so there's one. I'll let that get hard. It's going to be, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, and we'll come back and do the other one. I might put some paint on it first, though. We'll see. So I need to paint this wing and this leaf here, and I've used some saran wrap, cling wrap to wrap around this head as a mask, and I also need to mask off this other stump, the stump of the other wing. So I have a little piece of modeling clay here. It's really hot today, and it's can't get it to stick. There we go. Get behind this Now it's time to glue on the other wings, and I went ahead and painted it before I put it on here because I don't have enough room to airbrush it without getting paint all over everything else I don't want it on. or there'll be spots in here that won't get paint because it can't reach it. So I have more than I need here because I want to squeeze this down onto that stump. And then I'll smooth out the squeeze out. Okay. So let's squeeze it down. Water on my tool. Symmetrical angle here, and I'll just put a piece of tape on here just enough to hold on to it so it doesn't sag. Now I'm going to reach inside here, smooth out the other side.